Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to our evening's program. His Holiness Partha Sarathi Goswami actually doesn't need an introduction.
And don't.
No.
Don't introduce.
But I just need to say one thing, that when I was reflecting on how Maharaj in his youth, when there was really no ISKCON in Pietermaritzburg, and A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada didn't even put his lotus feet in our country. Maharaj sacrificed his youth, his life, to make the institution manifest. And for that, we are eternally grateful. He went to all the regions of KZN with his bus, and he made devotees. And so thrives ISKCON in South Africa today. And more than any other person that I know, this is on a very personal note, Maharaj is such a warm-hearted person that when you come in the vicinity of his shelter, you just feel a sense of generosity like no other. And I'm so happy that we all embrace that shelter this evening. May we just put our hands in the air and show appreciation with three loud Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that grossly exaggerated introduction. I was thinking when I was driving here on the terrible road, full of potholes and crevices and cracks, that it was 48 years ago I came to Pietermaritzburg. And then I thought, where's that 48 years gone? Where's it gone? Now I'm being driven in a chauffeured car with my secretary, assistant, my bona fide bodyguard from Westville Prison. It's fitting, right? Westville Prison bodyguard. And 48 years ago, I was driving to Maritzburg in an old car, manual driven, even before the time of the Toyota Taz. It was even more prehistoric. So 48 years, just gone like that. So in the Bhagavatam, there's that verse, Evam griheshu shaktanam pramata mitariha. Insurmountable time, imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much engrossed in family affairs. Imperceptible, insurmountable. Would you agree? Imperceptible. It's like 48 years ago, to me, is like last weekend. You think back when you were young children, at school perhaps. It seems like it was just the other day. It's imperceptible how this time factor. And then it's insurmountable. What does that mean? You can't overcome it. It's not that you can reverse old age. You can't take some pill or something and reverse old age. As Prabhupada says, what is the trouble, what is the difficulty with death? A few days more, a few days before. A few days more, a few days before. You cannot avoid death. But at least we're doing the right thing. We're practicing Krishna consciousness. Om Aginatamurandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshulatam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapatam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadanti Sambadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatapatikamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sakana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Jijivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sakana Lalita Shiva Shavitam Sya. Everyone. Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopikanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kancha Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sudadevi Pranamani Hari Priye Vanshakapa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachadine Nivishesha Sanyavadi. Everyone, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. Text 16. Abrahma Bhuvana Loke Purnam Avartano Arjuna. Tanatai Shinitai Gaurari Ki. Mamu Paicha Tu Countaya Purna Janma Navidyate. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka Purnavatano Arjuna Mamupe Chitakantaya Purna Janmaina Navidyate. Translation: from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest are all places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. For one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Please repeat: from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest are all places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. For one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. All kinds of yogis, and that is karma yogis, jnana yogis, and hatha yogis, eventually have to attain devotional perfection in bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness before they can go to Krishna's transcendental abode and never return. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has described that all other systems of yoga and different philosophies other than Vaishnava philosophy or Krishna consciousness, it's either a deviation or a stepping stone to Krishna consciousness. So all these other types of religious or spiritual practices which are going on throughout the world, they're either deviations or stepping stones. One of the two. I remember I was present when Srila Prabhupada was having a massage at Bhaktivedanta Manor. You know, London, Bhaktivedanta Manor. And he was being massaged, but I forget who it was. It was 1974, or no, 1973 perhaps. Yes, 1973. So his GBC representative at that time in Bhaktivedanta Manor was Shyamasundar Prabhu. And he's the Vaishnava that originally met George Harrison, you know, the Beatles. So this Shyamasundar was giving a report to Srila Prabhupada and telling him about the exploits of Guru Maharaji. Does anyone know about Guru Maharaji? He was a boy guru. Ah?
They were quite young,
Mm.
and he had a whole entourage of people that used to be chanting. I remember maybe he came to South Africa.
He came to South Africa. He did indeed. First of all, he presented himself as a boy, but actually he was grown up. And he allowed people to worship him as God, Bhagwan. And he was a little he was a little promiscuous with the opposite sex. And he came to South Africa in 1972. And he stayed in the same house that we stayed in La Mercy, in Tongat. It's called the Aircraft House. When you go on the highway, that's the old highway, you see on the beach side that house, and it has a roof like an aircraft. So he stayed in that house. And we also, 2 years later, stayed in that house. Myself, and there was only 5 devotees in the whole of South Africa. But we wouldn't go into the room that he stayed in because we thought we'd get possessed. But there was one lady with us also who joined from Rhodes University. So we put her in the room. But anyhow, she's still a devotee. She's a very nice lady. So that, in that house, and it could have been in that room, I found an original Srimad Bhagavatam, the one that Prabhupada printed in Vrindavan. It's got that brick red cover. It was volume 3, canto 1. And I opened it, and it had Rishi Kumar Brahmachari written in it. So he was a sannyasi later, and he was the first one to come with Shuddhi Prabhu to South Africa in September 1972. So they also stayed in the house. So Rishi Kumar, who was a sannyasi later, became influenced by the material energy and gave up his temporarily, I don't know, probably for this lifetime anyhow, gave up his, he was one of the young sannyasis from the old days. And he left South Africa. And he left two items. He left the Bhagavatam and he left his danda. So I never found the danda. You know, that stick, sannyasis. But I found the Bhagavatam. I think the Bhagavatam was more useful to me. So Guru Maharaji, Shyamasundar was telling Prabhupada was being massaged in Bhaktivedanta manner. And Prabhupada asked, so what is his philosophy and what's he doing? And Shyamasundar said, well, he's doing programs and he's claiming to be God. Then, as usual, Prabhupada became quite animated and excited. And he told Shyamasundar, this Guru Maharaj is an imposter. Take him to court. Take him to court. He's claiming to be God, but he's not. That is illegal. And Prabhupada was pushing, insisting that Shyamasundar Prabhu take Guru Maharaj to court. I don't think he did take him to court, but Prabhupada was pushing like that. Of course, later, this Guru Maharaj and all his followers, and there were many others actually, they all faded away in the 70s and the 1980s because there was no philosophy. No philosophy at all. Religious, social psychologists have noted that when there is some religious revival of some belief, it's based on the charisma of the main leader. And it usually only lasts, after he disappears, it usually only lasts about 5 years. But because Krishna consciousness is based on philosophy contained in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, we have been not only maintaining, but expanding since Prabhupada left. And will continue to expand because it's based on philosophy. It's not something sentimental. Bhagavad Gita, Raja Vijaya Raja Gun, king of knowledge. So even though Srila Prabhupada is not physically present, it's called prakat. The philosophy is there. And the philosophy, or the vani, the instructions, are actually more important than the personal association. You have these two words, vani and vapu. Vani is the instructions, and vapu is the form. So Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years ago and then vanished. No more vapu. But we do have the deity. But vani, his instructions are there in Bhagavad Gita. So this is how we associate. Then another example, if you choose to emphasize vapu, which means personal association, it is important. You can't minimize it. For example, if upstairs you have all of Prabhupada's books, let's say we lay out all of Prabhupada's books here, But downstairs in the kitchen, Prabhupada is personally talking. Now where will you go? Obviously. But they're also non-different. But still you will go downstairs. So you see how personal association is important. And then another example, I'm now going to the other side, the pendulum swings on the other side. Vapu, personal association. The mosquito also buzzes around the head of Srila Prabhupada. And it gets personal association. It even drinks the blood. Can you get more personal than that? Apart from Count Dracula. You can't get more personal than that, drinking the blood. But it's a nuisance. So it's getting the personal and no use. So you can use examples for either. So in conclusion, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said that anyone who hears transcendental topics, Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada speaking, anyone who hears is greatly blessed. But when those instructions come from the mouth, the blessings come more quickly. You understand that? They come more quickly, the blessings. And that's why Prabhupada traveled. Why else would he bother to go like to South Africa? He came to help his disciples, to enliven them. That's why he came. So continuing, those who attain the highest material planets, the planets of the demigods, are again subject to repeated birth and death. As persons on earth are elevated to higher planets, people on a higher planet such as Brahmaloka, Chandraloka, and Indraloka fall down to this earth. So in a few days it'll be Amavasya. What's Amavasya? Dark moon. In other words, no moon. And then in 1 month's time, is it 1 month? No, 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks' time. Purnim, full moon. Chandraloka, higher planet. They live for 18,000 of our years. 18,000. And the men are very handsome on the higher planets. Not like others. But also, correspondingly beautiful are the ladies. They're also very beautiful. Not like some I have seen. So, on the higher planets, there's a lot of sensual enjoyment. It's very sensuous. It's very sensuous. And when things are very sensuous, it's difficult to become detached and God-conscious. I'll give you an example. When we started preaching, when communism collapsed in 1992, we started preaching in Russia and Ukraine, Belarus, and all these places. And many, many devotees were coming, actually thousands. And one reason is in Eastern Europe, their culture is just more austere. Everything about their culture, the food, the weather. I've spoken to devotees from Russia, and sometimes they actually go into depression when the winter comes. And the winter doesn't mean a 0 or -1, like Pietermaritzburg. It means -31, -35. Not unusual. -20 is quite a usual thing. So austere. There's one story that one Russian came to the West and was shopping. And they looked into the shop window, and you know our shop windows, like in this Pietermaritzburg mall, what's it called? Liberty Mall. Every shop window is full of things. So the Russian man, he's looking at the shop window and says, I can't understand it. They're not selling anything. He was used to a shop window with nothing in it, or maybe just one item, because they didn't have any items. On one occasion I was in Zambia, and I was a little younger then, and it was a Kadashi, I was dry fasting, and I was traveling on a bus from Lusaka to Andola, all by myself, and dry fasting, and chanting 64 rounds. 1991, 1992. And I remember they were playing very loud Zambian music in the bus. It was very uncomfortable, and I just had to break my fast. The bus stopped and I went into a supermarket and there was nothing on the shelf. I thought I would have a choice, like you get a big choice in South Africa, yogi sip and this and that, Red Bull or whatever it is, Monster. But there was nothing on the shelf. And that's life in Zambia. So we see this, devotees from Eastern Europe, they're just more austere. That's why you'll find in Sridham Mayapur, our world headquarters, there's possibly 1,000 or 1,500 devotees from Russia. There's a whole community there. You've just been there, Nishinga. They have their own Namahata. They have their own regional council. They deal with their own problems. So, more austere. I saw this also when I was giving talks in Ukraine. Sit and listen for 2 hours, for 3 hours, without even moving. Here you go more than 30 minutes, isn't it? And you start falling asleep. The cell phone starts going off. You start moving around and thinking, oh man, when's he gonna finish? I only came here for the beans curry. I'm a Laka Indian and all. Free food. I've heard it all before. But they're very austere, and so the point I'm making is that sense gratification spoils you. It spoils you, sense gratification. And in the West, there's ample sense gratification. So, not so serious. But Eastern Europe, they're by culture more austere. The weather, just everything about that part of the world. And therefore it's easier for them to take to spiritual life. I had a very close friend who's a sannyasi, and he was in charge of the Gurukul in Vrindavan in the 1980s. And he told me that during the summer period, some of the children at the Gurukul would go back home to Europe and America, and some would stay. And the children that went back to their parents in Europe and America, obviously the parents spoil them, because it's the nature of the parent. And they take them to Disneyland and Wonderland and buy them double fudge ice creams and spoil them. So when these children came back to the Gurukul, they were all restless. It took them a month to like settle down. Whereas the ones that never went were very peaceful. So the sense gratification actually disturbed them. So we think, my child, my daughter, my son, naturally that the parents have this idea, let me indulge my child. Let me give them sense gratification. But actually you're spoiling them. If it's excessive, we have to use that word excessive. It's like salt. You have your beans curry and there's no salt. Not very nice. And you have your beans curry and there's too much salt. Not very nice. It's got to be in between. So sense gratification, which means eating, sleeping, the body requires it. You can't go without sleeping. Who can go without sleeping? You can't go without eating. But you regulate it. Certain time sleep, certain time wake up. And you don't overdo it. You don't overdo it. You don't like binge. You know what is a binge? You go binging, and eat too much, and then get indigestion, and then have to spend considerable time on the toilet. So sense gratification really has to be regulated. And the more we can play it down, actually, the better it will be for our mind. But some sense gratification is required. And I gave the example, you have to sleep, you have to eat. And in our Vedic system, marriage is also allowed. Not just allowed, it's actually recommended. It's recommended. And most of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates, of course, were married. So continuing. So people on higher planets, Brahmaloka, Chandraloka, and Indraloka, fall down to this earth. Yeah. Brahma lives by earth calculation for how long? 311 trillion and 40 billion years. You can't even imagine that, can you? It's way beyond your imagination. By these calculations, the life of Brahma is fantastic. Definitely, from our point of view, it's fantastic. But from the viewpoint of eternity, it is like a flash of lightning. A flash of lightning is less than 1 second. It's something like 0.1, 0.2 of a second. Now listen to this. In the causal ocean, there are innumerable Brahmas rising and disappearing like bubbles in the Atlantic Ocean. So there are waves in the Atlantic Ocean. You can't even count them. And then behind the waves and in front of the waves, there are bubbles. You've seen this. Bubbles. So those bubbles come and then disappear. So the Vedic scriptures say this is like the life, the appearance and disappearance of Brahmas. And remember, Brahma's life is 311 trillion years. It's one breath of Mahavishnu. And we think we're living a long time. Our measly 80 or 90 years, we think that's a long time. It really is not even a shadow of a flash of lightning. There are some insects, there are some gnats, and they come up, especially when the sun goes down. You might have seen them near lakes, and they fly around. There's a certain species of female gnats that only live for a few hours. And then I read that while they're flying around, they actually have sex and reproduce. And they live for a few hours. Some live for one day. Gnats. So we should use our life for the best possible purpose, and that is to become God conscious. Of course, we can't neglect our other responsibilities. That may be I'm a mother, I'm a father. I have certain responsibilities, perhaps to my parents. But actually, this is all secondary. Primary is our own Krishna consciousness or God consciousness. Then you may say, but isn't that being a little selfish? This is an argument now. Selfish. I'm thinking of myself. But if someone is drowning in Midmar Dam and you can't swim, it's your cousin, your daughter, and they're drowning. Obviously you want to save them, and you're wade out there so far. But if you can't swim yourself, what's the point? There's no point. You'll both drown. So first you learn how to save yourself. Then you're in a position to help those around you who you're attached to. And that would be your children, your parents, if they want help. Some don't want help. They push you away. But some are more receptive. So if they're more receptive, then we preach to them God consciousness. And we try to involve them. So this human form of life is actually meant for becoming God conscious. We are rational animals. What does that mean, rational? We can examine. We can think. Socrates said that a life that is unexamined is worthless. You've got to examine your life. All right, I was born here in Pietermaritzburg some years ago. And then I did my education, and now I have some type of job for the time being. I have some job paying my tax. Now, what is the real purpose of my existence? Is it just to work hard day and night, and then perhaps get drunk? Isn't it? Saturday night, save up my money and go to, as I drove up here, I saw KFC, and then I saw next door Nando's, even more people. And they're not buying, vegan food. Is this the goal of life? So one has to examine and think, well, what direction do I want to go in? Do I want to strive to become God-conscious, self-realized? And the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple. We just have to apply it to our life. So this is the gift that Prabhupada is giving us through the mercy of, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving it through his empowered representatives like Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So now we must take the medicine. You're a doctor and you're in the hospital and you make the correct diagnosis. And then you get the prescribed medicine. But you can't force. It's up to the patient to take. And that medicine should be taken daily in a regulated, prescribed way. If you're supposed to take 3 pills every day, then what the prescription tells you, you can't take 30 pills on one day and think it'll be beneficial. So the medicine is to chant Krishna's holy name, to associate with devotees. This is the medicine, to take prasad. That's the diet. To take prasad. And these temples, this is a very beautiful temple, and other temples we have throughout the world, they're like hospitals. They're actually like hospitals. And there are doctors within the hospitals. And there are specialists. And these specialists will come and see you. So these would be, at the moment, practically speaking, in ISKCON, these would be the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, like Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, Kadamba Khan Maharaj. They're more like specialists. And they go from temple to temple, as a doctor goes from ward to ward. So we should take advantage. Take advantage, practice, be enthusiastic, and have faith in the holy name. Another pusti, another method of nourishment is to visit Vrindavan and to visit Mayapur. Go on pilgrimage. It's not so far. If you're in South America, they have to take one flight, usually to Africa, and then from there, another so many hours. But South Africa has cultural relationships with India, and it's not difficult. In Ukraine, if you're a man and under 60, you're not allowed to leave Ukraine, presently. But we don't have that type of restriction in South Africa. And many of us are in a position to go on pilgrimage to Vrindavan and Mayapur. And then you see Krishna consciousness from a different perspective. And it's very wonderful. It's very wonderful. The temples, Jagannath Temple, Jagannath Puri, and the world headquarters we're building in Mayapur. So I encourage you to become Utsran Nishtaya Dayat, enthusiastic, confident and patient, and continue in your practice of spiritual life. Always try to be enthusiastic. We can learn from the materialists. They're enthusiastic, but not for spiritual life, for making money, for drugs. You've seen how the drug addict must have that drug. They must have that cocaine or tick or whatever it is. They must have that drug. So we can learn from that to also be very enthusiastic. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Hare ki jai. Dal Nitai Gaura Hare ki jai. They're looking very beautiful, dressed in black. So for Amavasya, when the gopis go on their secret night journey to meet the beautiful Krishna, they dress in black, so they can't be seen. And their jewelry is black, like black, dark blue sapphires. And they cover their skin, which is golden, with musk. So they merge into the darkness of the night, and they can't be seen. Sort of like a criminal in Northdale, sneaking around in the car park of the temple, stealing your battery and breaking into your car, wearing a mask. I see many people now, they wear masks, especially black masks. Dan, 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 dan. So, yes, they're dressed in black, which is very beautiful, very nice. It's what they do in Vrindavan. They'll dress Radharani, and well, especially Radharani, in black around the Amavasya period. Maybe 1 or 2 days before Amavasya and a couple days after. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, would you like to ask any question or make a comment? Please speak freely. Yes.
Thank you for the enlightening discourse today. The verse that you chose today brought to mind an example for me. I thought about the war in Ukraine.
The war in Ukraine.
Yeah, and I thought that none of us would plan a holiday or a trip to Ukraine. It would seem ridiculous because of the current war that's there. But our situation in the material world at the moment is just as dire as those people in Ukraine. But we try to enjoy as much as possible, not realizing the dangerous situation. So thank you for that. That brought up those thoughts.
It's a good point. Yes, in Ukraine it's sort of brought to the surface. It's extremely intense. And actually in this regard, I should mention that one very nice devotee, his name is Krishna Tattva. And his wife is my disciple, his father-in-law is my disciple. And he was cooking Food for Life in, it's called Donbass, Lugansk, and a missile. And he died 3-4 days ago. I knew him very well because he spoke English. And you're there in Ukraine and you're surrounded by hundreds of devotees, but you can't communicate because they don't speak English and you don't speak Russian. But he was one of the few devotees who could speak English, and he was very nice. Krishna Tattva. Whenever I would see him, I'd say, "Give me Krishna Tattva." And he translated in my talks many times. And then I mentioned his wife was actually my disciple. So he left his body in Ukraine. And another devotee also left. So when this happens, it is disturbing. You can't help it. We know we're not this body. We have some realization. Ishvara, Parama, Krishna. Krishna's controlling everything, but still, it's frightening. Like when we had the Durban riots. It was very frightening. So, when we go through these tests, it's intense. And if it wasn't intense, it wouldn't be a test. But after the test, we can look back and say, oh, it was this, it was that, or I should have done this, I should have done that. But during the test, very intense. And we're all going to go through the ultimate test, which is death, and there'll be smaller tests on the way to that ultimate test. We lose our job, a car accident, we're diagnosed with some disease, diabetic or something, or our favorite football team loses, Bafana loses. You know, some people, they're so attached to their football team, they have heart attacks. You know that? They have heart attacks. And they die. During the World Cup football, the rate of heart attacks went up. More people, heart attacks. My football team. And then I remember seeing, someone showed me on TV, one particular, I don't know who it was, Italy or some, they won the World Cup, and their fans were jumping up and down, up and down, up and down, and they're waving their hands, and it went on and on and on. And all I could think of was a kirtan, Radha Radhanath. It had all the ingredients. They're going like this. Ah. Even the ladies are going, ah. It was just minus the holy name. Apart from that, it seemed like a kirtan. You know, a really nice kirtan that Kadamba Kamaja, one of the sannyasis, will lead. Everyone is jumping, everyone is smiling. So I remember that. So unfortunately, these fans of this particular football, these football fans, they had, to use a phrase, missed the goal. The goal of life, they had missed it. But you haven't. You're on course for the goal of your life. So continue with enthusiasm. Thank you for that point. We shouldn't become complacent. Although we're living here in South Africa, anything can happen. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to ask us?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You were explaining the potency of the vaku, which is the presence, and the vani, which is the instruction. And then I was thinking that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada, he was such a strong spiritualized presence, physically in those lives. And then he had to leave. And that must have been so devastating for you. And as much as, this is for me from the outside, as much as this whole spiritual process is based on transcendence and on the higher goal of eternality, that mood of separation is so deep.
Yes, vipralamba. Vipralamba. So, when you feel separation for a non-devotee, it really has no purpose, no real meaning. It's what is called prakat ras. It's just material emotions. But when those emotions are directed towards a spiritual personality, it's very significant. And one may become emotional. But these emotions are transformations of bliss. Now, how do you understand that? One is weeping, these emotions, but actually it's the highest bliss. How do you explain that? Sanatana Goswami gives an example in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that one sadhu went to the Himalayas, I think Gangotri, the mouth of the Ganges, and the Ganges flows very fast, but it's extremely cold. Ordinarily, it would ice over. So this sadhu had to take bath, and he had to collect the water, but it was extremely cold. And when his hand came in contact with this extreme water, cold water, and also snow and some ice, his hand actually became numb and then began to burn. Have you experienced this with snow? Have we ever had snow in Maritzburg? Apart from what's in the fridge and the deep freeze. Have you seen snow? Frost. Jack Frost. But not snow. Have you seen snow? You make a snowball, and then you throw it at someone. You make a snowman. Then your hands, they first go numb, and then they start to burn. But it's snow. It's cold, but your hand is burning. So it seems one thing, but the opposite. So Vipralamba Ras, a deep attachment for spiritual personalities, which not only includes Krishna and the Brijbasis, but Lord Chaitanya, his associates, also one's Diksha and Siksha Guru. It appears to be dukkha, distress, but actually it's a transformation of the Ladini Shakti, or the pleasure-giving potency. But from an outsider, it looks to be the same. But for someone who knows a little bit about spiritual life, they understand this.
If people are visiting us in Pietermaritzburg, I don't think it's fine.
Just beware of Jack Frost. Jack Frost. He's got it out for you. He's going to follow you. Anything else? Question?
I think the inspiration.
Oh,
How can one absorb the wound of the spiritual master or the Siksha
Iste soasaki rag paramatma avastito bhava. Before the state of absorption is attachment. If you're attached to pizza, you'll be absorbed in thinking about it. So before being absorbed, it's become attached. So one has to become attached to Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, Param Guru, etc. So there's external attachment, internal. I'll give you an example. External would be Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day. You're running around, you're organizing Abhishek, you're organizing this, you say a few words. It's all somewhat external, but it's part of our procedure and it's part of our philosophy. Internal is you're thinking more of the mood of the person you're attached to. And as you become more attached, you become, absorbed. But I'll give you the example. The iron rod in the fire. You know that example? The iron rod goes in the fire. It becomes like the fire, but it's not the fire. And that iron rod can act like fire, but it's not the fire. It's separate. So you become so attached to Diksha Guru, Siksha Guru, Param Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Bhaktivinoda, maybe particular personalities that you're enlivened with, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and then your consciousness becomes like the iron rod in the fire. And you become, we could use the word Krishnaized. Now this is, in Sanskrit, is called avesh. Avesh, one with, but not like the Mayavadis. You know, the Mayavadis, one with God, I am God. No, one with, but in purpose. And the word is avesh. Avesh. And it's very powerful. There's a story, one man, he's driving, and he goes on this highway here, near KFC, and then there's the crematorium and the graveyard. So there's a funeral going on, crematorium. And some other, he parks his car, and he walks in there, and they're all lamenting. They're all crying. I've seen this at a funeral, actually. Believe it or not. It was a devotee. And she was pulling her hair out and actually fainted. I was quite shocked. And it wasn't even a father, it was a father-in-law. Made it even more interesting. So this man, he sees they're crying and they're this and they're distressed and then they're on the floor and they're weeping, and he starts to weep. And he doesn't even know who died. He doesn't even know who kicked the bucket. He doesn't know, but he's crying. Now this means what's going on around you affects you, and you become influenced. So this is a material example of a Vaish. Or getting back to that example, the World Cup. And you're there, and there's 100,000 football fans, and they all go, rah, 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 rah. You also feel something. You don't even like football. You like cricket. And you would never go for that team anyhow. Who goes for Bafana? You've got to be like a little loose wire or something. You know? But that last goal they get within the last 10 seconds, and you're also going, oh, and your hairs are standing on the end. I had a godbrother, extremely esteemed, wonderful godbrother. And he told me confidentially, of course I can't say his name, but if you grease my palm, I could. Anyhow, very esteemed godbrother. I mean, very, very exemplary. Sannyasi, guru, GBC. Hope I'm not giving it away too much. But not from South Africa. So stop thinking about anyone from South Africa. He's on the aircraft and he's bored. So what does he watch? A Hindi movie. Now you know these Hindi movies. You know? The boy dies, the girl dies, he starts crying. It's passing emotion. It's nothing real. So you can't help it. Now I'm giving examples of material emotion. What to speak of spiritual? It's even stronger, it's even deeper. But he told me he got sentimental and his eyes started to... You can't help it sometimes. You know, like a horror movie or something. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Anything else you'd like to add? Yes, thank you. Hari.
This system that Krishna created of disseminating his knowledge coming down. And we find that, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking to Arjuna. And even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya received the knowledge from Ishvara Puri, and then he instructs Rupa Goswami and Sarathi. But then later on in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I want to know from what he receives knowledge from Ramana and Acharya.
That's right.
So, like opposite way around.
That's chapter 8. Ramananda Siksha. And it's one of the most intimate chapters in the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 8. And Lord Chaitanya went down to South India, the bank of the Godavari River. Ramananda, he asked Ramananda 8 different questions. Where is the best place to practice Krishna consciousness? Of course he knew, but he's asking. And Ramananda Rai says, Vrindavan, Brajabhumi, Leela Ras, Vrindavan. And then he asks, what is the best type of knowledge? And then, what is the most painful thing in this world? Ramananda Roy says, to live without the association of devotees. There's many questions. So, ontologically, Lord Chaitanya is exhibiting the mood of Radharani, because Radha Bhav, Prabhu, Sadabhiman, especially in the latter part of his, he's in the mood of Radharani, Godadvari. And who is Ramananda Roy? Vishaka. Vishaka entered into Ramananda Roy. The Acharyas have stressed that. So it's Vishaka giving advice to Radharani. That's on a deep spiritual, ontological, deeper level. Or you can see it as Ramananda Roy. This is interesting because Ramananda Roy was not a Brahmin. He was not a Kshatriya. He was a Kayasta. And in South India, a Kayasta is like a Sudra. But he's giving instruction to Lord Chaitanya, who outwardly is a Brahmin. So Lord Chaitanya was, this is an example where Lord Chaitanya is taking socially it's unacceptable, but Lord Chaitanya also promoted Haridas Thakur as the Namacharya, who was born in a Muslim family. So that's another reason why this exchange. It's a very wonderful, very intimate section. You should read it very carefully, especially the purports.
There's one purport, I think it's 90, very long purport.
Yes.
I've read that purport many times.
Chapter 8, Madhya Lila. There are certain chapters that are extremely important, and that's one of them. So thank you all very much. Please continue practicing. Be enthusiastic. So I think we should have a short kirtan. It'd be nice if someone could lead it because it's a bit difficult for me. But short. Who can do that? It's called sign movement. Short kirtan. 5 minutes.
Krishna